This is a short introduction to how to create intervals. There's a number of ways to do this. This is one suggestion. The reason I'm going to suggest this method is because it gives you a great deal of control, and you can create all kinds of different transitions with this method later on. With this assignment, we have to look at three aspects of color. We want to have something that has a specific temperature. In this case, the first one's warm. We also want to have variations in value and saturation. So we're going to look at each of these. When we go to select our colors, first we need that aspect of temperature. So we need to know what temperatures are warm and which colors are cool. Red is the warmest. As you move away from red, you're getting cooler. So that makes everything in the top half of the color wheel warm. There is an ambiguous point though. At hue 270 here, at the blue magenta, and hue 90 here in the yellow green. And that's ambiguous because it's right in the middle. The furthest point away from red is cyan, which is the coolest, and so right in the middle here, it's not warm or cool. Now it can be relatively warmer or cooler, but that's something different. And the general idea there is that green is cooler than the red, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the yellow green itself is a cool temperature. So going back to the assignment, we've got to pick something. So we're going to go ahead and pick red. We'll start with the warmest because again, primaries and secondaries are allowed. The next we're going to do is pick yellow. Well, we have to keep in mind that we need a variation of value and saturation. And so I know that with these right now, they're both fully saturated. So I need to make this a different saturation. At the same time, I want a different value. And so I need to make sure that the values don't end up matching or not close. Luckily, yellow is a very light value, and so I can be pretty confident in what it is. And so right now you can see that they're mixed, but at full saturation, there's that difference. So this is how you get into that situation. You need to make sure there is that difference. So we can go back. We can either add more black or take away some of the white. If we take some of the white, we're not going to make a big change in the value. If we look at that value now, it's still relatively the same, so we didn't really make a big difference in it. So what we ideally are going to do is just go ahead and take away some of the black at this point. Now remember, when you're creating depth, you need to consider how all these elements work together, and ideally the cooler temperature is also going to be the darker temperature. The next step is our transitional steps. We have 6 transitional steps. Basically, you can count the number of steps you have, take away 1 because 1 doesn't change. And so for this, we needed to take that number 6, because there's 6 transitional steps, and divide it by 100. So basically that gives us about 16.6 for each one. And so I'm going to go ahead and type in the opacity here at 84. Now there's a little bit of rounding that needs to be done, and that's something you are going to need to consider. But at this point, you can get away with keeping it just pretty close to these values. And so for the first step, we're going to go ahead and add our red. Need to make sure that it's fully saturated, and it was not, so I'm glad I checked it. So now we can go ahead, and I need to make sure I'm adding it at full saturation. So go back to 84. What we're going to do is we're going to mix the red with our yellow. And what happens here is basically you see 84% of the red and then 16% of the yellow. And so when we check it, we can see now that there's a difference. We're going to go back and continue this process. So now another 16 down, you're looking at about 68, 67 ballpark. Continuing, so we can start to see that orange coming in. Now we're at the middle point, so we know we can just go to 50. That's the easiest one. And let me just, there we go. And so just continuing that process the whole way down. And that gives us a nice even transition. And the way we can check transitions is we can look at these RGB values. And basically the steps need to be consistent. So you can see the red value consistently gets less. The G and B values consistently increase. And if you were to take even a closer look, you would see that those values, each step is consistent. Each step is equal to the one before it. Now again, we have that little variation of plus or minus kind of 2. But that consistency is very strong, and you don't really get this consistency from some other methods that are available, which is why I'm recommending it.